making, extraordinarily important. One of the things on our radar screen, federal advisory committees, science advisory boards, the traditional structures that we've seen before, but work that's been done around the government and more of which needs to continue to get done to try to bring innovation into participation practices. Without a doubt, I'm glad that you, to this audience, the larger audience, have re-signaled the importance of the public participation, public engagement in decision making, which I think everyone has echoed on the panel, that this is about really trying to bring the public and the expertise of the public and the engagement of the public into the way that we make decisions. And at the same time getting us to push out some of those challenges and questions so that not all of the decision making or problem solving happens on the government side alone. So it's not only the participation agenda but also the collaboration agenda. But definitely those principles and the kinds of things that have been articulated by the civic engagement community whom we have invited to come to the White House and will engage in a larger conversation going forward online and through other meetings in trying to push forward on bringing meaning to those principles in practice and driving that out to the agencies. So I also want to commend not only the interest groups but the agencies who've done a lot of work already to date in trying to use new technologies, but I think most important to echo what you said, new practices and processes that aren't just about putting up a blog or putting up a wiki. Everybody wants to throw up a wiki now, right? But unless there is someone listening on the other end to what comes in, we can have all the public comment websites we want, but the goal here is to try to change the practices of the way we make decisions. Again, not easy to do, so that we're creating meaningful processes and technologies that serve as the conduit, and then in turn allow us to take the account of and get manageable and effective expertise in and perform the way that we really make decisions so that it's an effective process, not just a slick new tool and technology. Thanks.
Question from a remote audience, and the San Bernardino League of Women Voters is very engaged. Yeah. This is a good question, though. Is there any nation, this is a good question. Is there any nation in the world that is already doing open government well? Have we looked at models that work?
So, a couple of models come from different places around the world. Singapore has a tremendous, and they've been working at this for years. They have a very open electronic government platform with many of their transactions online. Several of the U.S. trading partners that are engaged now with the government that Vivek is now working with are looking at this area. The UK has basically a government gateway that they run a lot of transactions through. So there are any number of governments, and there's a whole international e-government movement that the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development is involved in, and so there are a lot of different nations around the world that are working this problem, and the U.S. government has been and will continue to be, I'm sure, engaged with them.
Hi, this is Laura Engdahl. In a past life, I edited a publication called The New Public Innovator, which was a Clinton-era newsletter that shared ideas about how government agencies could act more accountably. And of course, that was a different technological era, but I'm wondering, I think this is a question probably for Beth, but maybe for Vivek also. Two questions. Are there going to be any efforts to share ideas so that people working in government have tangible examples of when this kind of participative government leads to good decisions? And then secondly, are there going to be any efforts to put the mechanisms in place so that this is sustained into future administrations?
Let me try to be brief. So first to say, and I'm glad you mentioned the work that's been done in the past, because we are, of course, building on the shoulders of giants, if you will. We have been through reinventing government once before, and now technology has really brought us to a new place in which I think our efforts at reinventing government are not only building on what's come before, but enabling us to try really tremendously new things in terms of our ability to engage in policymaking innovations. We are committed to, as part of this process now and going forward, showcasing the innovations that are taking place around government, because by no means we didn't arrive on the scene to a blank slate. There's work that's being done. Your colleague just mentioned some of the work, for example, that's been done at the EPA. So what we want to do is also to shine a light on what's been working and to get feedback in what's worked, what we can do better to take innovations forward to the next step. And I also, to that, and that gets to the collaboration international point, we have had outreach to already international CIOs, international governments, gotten feedback from them, looking at what's being done, and are engaged in international dialogue as well as a dialogue across agencies now. Our interagency process that's been going already has participation from 50 agencies that have weighed in. And that's very much about not only soliciting ideas around policy, but showcasing and finding out about innovations, amazing things that are taking place, and that we want to celebrate, since they are moving us towards transparency and openness and greater innovation in the way that we make policy.
And I think just to add to that, a couple of things have also happened, since the early effort. One is just Moore's law. In terms of computing power. Two is what's happening is there's mass personalization when it comes to technology overall, and that's not unique to just the consumer sector, but also now moving towards the public sector, which is how do you personalize government for individuals? Because from birth to death, the public sector will touch you in so many different ways. And how do we ensure that at the point you care about a certain service, that it's delivered at the right time, so information is relevant? To give you a small example, during the inauguration, just through democratizing data, there are a bunch of applications that were created as a result of a competition called Apps for Democracy. And one of them was just a simple application, so you could find out on your iPhone what the closest metro station was, and when the next train was coming, based on where you were standing, or whether based on where you were standing, what the rentals were available on Craigslist. So what you're seeing is a movement towards mass personalization, and then also the birth of the third window, which is not the TV and not the computer, but the cell phone. So massive deployment of services to the cell phone. And the South Korean government has done a good job in terms of really personalizing services on mobile computing. And I think there are a lot of lessons that we can learn, not just from South Korea, but especially from the developing world, where they have to provide government services at a low cost, whether it's how you conduct the census or how you deliver services to eradicate poverty or disease.
Add something? This is back to what you just said, and then the previous question about participation and other countries that do better with participation, because I think there are lessons in the developing country there too. There are a lot of experiments now with participatory budgeting, where people come together and say what their priorities are at different levels. India, Indonesia, Brazil is where it got piloted, and we do not have the best right-to-know laws in the world in the United States anymore. There are better right-to-know laws in India and Mexico and South Africa and now Indonesia. So we need to recognize that there are other places that have, first of all, better legal structures to work on, and that are really working on bottom-up participation. The UK is also doing a lot of new experiments around, but it's a kind of top-down participation, which is sort of interesting. The government has decided people aren't participating in government and democracy enough, and so they're reaching out and trying to pull people in at the local level and all the way up to the federal level. So there are a number of places where governments are really working hard on trying to figure out how they can engage citizens in a different way.
I just want to acknowledge one question from the remote audience and tell the person who asked about the best approach for appealing an inappropriate denial of a FOIA request. So we will get back in touch with you and put you in touch with some folks who can help you with that. I don't think that this is the best panel for that. Although following so I'm going to take another question from the remote audience, and it has to do with that sort of personalizing government, I think, ties into that. How does the Obama administration plan to balance or address the dynamic tension between open government and transparency and the need for protecting individual privacy?
Sure, and I think everyone looks at this challenge through one prism, right, which is that it can't be done. But the way I think we have to look at it is just like in life, in the physical world, people decide, based on credentialing and what information they want to share to receive a specific service. We need to think about it in the same way when it comes to the digital world, which is it's great to be able to participate and engage in an anonymous fashion as you're commenting on an issue or advancing an agenda. But then when it comes down to receiving a specific service, credentials have to be verified. And that's a trade-off. Rather than thinking of it in terms of